Welcome to Memory Matters for All Ages. I'm Janelle Nichols from the Gables of Hudson Assisted Living Residence. Welcome back. We are also welcoming Catherine Kilpatrick. Kathy is a speech language pathologist. She brings to our program literally decades of helping people with cognitive issues, memory, and communication concerns. Kathy has an abundance of resources and suggestions. She is a national speaker, author of over 30 publications, and she can help people that have a diagnosis with Alzheimer's disease. She specializes in helping those with that diagnosis and related dementias and helping them walk that journey when dementia comes home. Her heart is giving support and educating the families and the caregivers that are dealing with such a situation. Catherine, welcome back. It is a privilege to talk about this subject today because knowing you for the many years I have, I know your heart. So take us to this topic today.
Thanks, Janelle. Excuse me, my voice seems to be having an issue at the moment, so hopefully we'll be okay. We actually did a series when dementia comes home,
we did,
and the
yes.
fact that that was an issue with my mom, and so I've also walked that path as well. This week we're going to talk about those with mild dementia, and we last week had talked about just normal aging, but then when do we kind of cross over that line? The big thing is early diagnosis, and that doesn't often happen. I see so many people in my home health career who have definite issues where they need supervision and they're not able to do things like we would like them to, be able to be safe in their own homes. So one of the benefits is the early diagnosis and having everybody have a chance to plan for the future. So whether it's do they move out of their house, do they do estate planning, what is it that they need to be able to do? And strategies, which is the main thing that I work on, is trying to help them so they can be safe, and then working with those caregivers really makes a difference in the quality of life of the person that's been diagnosed, but also in the caregivers, because often they don't know what to do, and some of their strategies actually make it more difficult, and they're not aware. They need that education. That's why we're doing this program as well.
I would think that early diagnosis would be a real challenge, and I'll give you an example. There's a family that I'm working with, or have in the past, and the daughter is here in town and the son is out of state. The daughter is noticing things that is of great concern to her, but then the son calls mom long distance. They're chatting. Mom is answering his questions correctly. She sounds fine. So he calls the sister and says, I don't know what you're talking about. Mom is fine. Can you comment? I mean, I would think that this is a common problem in early diagnosis.
Janelle, if I had $1 for every time, even personally, that I have dealt with that situation, that is so very true. And so I'm going to give some facts that may be helpful with regard to this. First of all, people with mild dementia can cover well. They're very social, someone who's very well organized and who has kind of made subtle modifications. No one's going to know that that's going on. It's much harder to see. Now, it's not a bad thing. My mom was super organized, so it was not until I took her on a trip for several days that I noticed just little odds and ends of things. And the other part was she had a significant hearing loss, so everybody was attributing that to her hearing difficulties. But the recommendation is, if you're a family member and you're out of town, and my mom was on the East Coast, you need to spend a week under the same roof with them. You need to just observe and do things, not go in and out and in and out. And that help is tremendous. People coming and taking them to appointments or out to eat, but they're coming and going. So they're not seeing the daily frustrations. It is so important to not only spend the time with them and then take them away from their familiar environment and then just be an observer. someone had said to me, well, you're being critical. And I said, no, I just want to observe what the changes are so we can be proactive and do some appropriate planning.
That makes perfect sense as far as seeing someone in more than one day in various situations.
Right.
What about someone who starts to repeat themselves?
Okay. Repeating questions is something to very much pay attention to. Excuse me. When they're doing that, that's kind of a red flag. I mean, we all do it a little bit, but so often I go in and somebody will say, oh, if my friend, spouse, whatever, asks me what day it is or who's coming over today, and we're going to talk about strategies later for future programs to do that. But it's not always word finding difficulties. Sometimes the only change you'll see is their behavior, because what's happening is everything is overwhelming. Like if you lived in France for a couple of days and you knew a little bit of French, if you were visiting, you'd probably be fine. But if you were there for a month or two, what often happens is then you defer to the person that knows French and say, you pick for me, or what did they say? And so there's little things that we can take a look at. And then the problem is, as people advance in the disease, they don't think they have a problem, because they don't remember that they asked the questions over and over again. So, so a lot of people have remained in their homes, but they're unable to take care of the needs that are necessary. I remember getting a referral once from someone from a presentation we did, and went into the home, and there were stacks of newspapers everywhere. And if the person was always this way, that would be one thing. But as the executive functioning starts to go, they have more difficulty. So does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, absolutely. So you're saying a family member needs to be very observant, realistic, and not ignore something that might be a subtle clue.
Right, right.
Okay.
And here's what often happens, Janelle, also. I've done some home health for so long that you just tend to see some of these patterns. And what I will often hear from a family when I go in to do an evaluation and someone is being forgetful, and maybe they've had a mild stroke or something else has gone on, and I will say, do you think they had some memory problems before? And generally I'll hear, no, they were fine. And then they'll go, until they went in the hospital, they had anesthesia, they had surgery, okay, or maybe they had a urinary tract infection, or perhaps they were dehydrated. And now they've come home and there's more significant problems, that major crisis. And what happens is, as I talked about in the very beginning, people can cover for it well. If they don't think there's any problem, they're coming and going. And it's not like we're trying to look for this in every single person, but we want to be proactive so that we can take advantage. Because there are many reversible causes as well, and there are also medications that can be helpful, especially if you get it in the earlier stages of the disease process.
You know, I think a lot of people ignore the physical component of cognitive issues, especially in my own family. Thyroid, hypothyroidism is seems to be rampant in our family, and if that is not balanced, there are some real unusual communication issues there.
Right.
One family member, is how we discovered it, was reversing their words. For example, rather than saying it's a beautiful day, they were saying it's a day beautiful. And it was very unusual, but a wake-up call. So the physical part is something that can't be ignored either.
Well, and I think too, we do this for a living. So our radar screen is different. And so one of the reasons that we've decided to do this program series is to help people have some additional information on your radar screen so that you can pick up some things. So let me give you a couple of tips here.
Absolutely.
You talk about near and dear to my heart. The one thing, and I've worked with people in middle stages of Alzheimer's disease or dementia, and it's all about meeting them where they are. It is so important. You know, I'm an advocate for quality of life. So one patient I went in to see, and his daughter was taking care of him. He had moved in recently. He was hearing impaired and had dementia, and like most often, he sits on his easy chair, watching and sleeping in front of TV most of the day. And so I had a referral to see if I could help her understand the disease process and what she could do. After assessing him, figuring out how to communicate better, like face him, not talk behind him, slow your rate of speech down, use larger materials, we came up with questions and reminiscence things at his level that we sat there and talked for an entire hour, and she learned all these strategies that she could do with him. So, and knowing the person's story is so important. I would go and visit my mom, and she was a Scrabble player. We had been playing, that's why I wrote all these books, Janelle, and all this stuff, since I was 8 years old. And so when I would go home, I was the Scrabble player with her, and I noticed when I went in a couple of times that she had this cheat sheet list on the back of the Scrabble dictionary with 2- and 3-letter words. Oh. I was so annoyed because I just play real world word Scrabble, and this is what she did with her friends, and that was fine. I missed it. I talk about somebody with great strategies. When she felt she was taking too long to come up with a word, she would use the cheat sheet. So actually one Christmas Eve, I went through the Scrabble dictionary and created a list of every 2- and 3-letter non-word and laminated it and bought new dictionaries and gave them to everybody in the family. So we all now use the cheat sheet. And but the other thing was when she started having trouble keeping score, we didn't. Or if she put up a word that wasn't spelled right, we just ignored it because she wanted to play Scrabble. So whether it's cooking, I mean, there's all kinds of modifications that people can still be involved in the things that they love. And so that's one of my favorite things to do in my professional realm, is to help people who seem to become disengaged, find out what interests them, what level it works. So one woman had, her daughter kept bringing in stories, books to read. She wasn't reading them because she couldn't read at that level. And remember, got Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Guess what? She was reading again because that was at her level.
So you can compensate based upon what that person's interests were, what their occupation was. I know we worked some years back with a teacher, and she was an award-winning teacher and would tell these fantastic stories, but that was actually masking her dementia because people didn't realize these stories were made up now. They were fictional. But she was such a beautiful storyteller that it masked what actually was happening. All right. Kathy,
let me add something right before that.
Absolutely, go ahead.
I evaluated a gentleman. I couldn't get him to stop joking. Guess what? That was a cover because he felt he couldn't answer the questions. And I've seen that happen a couple of times. And I finally had to say to him, I need to do an evaluation. Could you put, I love your jokes, but I need to find out where you're at. So I think we just have like a minute or so left.
We do. And I want to remind our audience, watch at the end of the program for the website where you can go to Kathy's site and get more information about what we talked about today. Kathy, as usual, you're going to finish us up with a thought. What do you have for us?
Okay. This is one of my favorite quotations, and when I was shopping one day, I came across this little poster here, which is that quotation. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscape, but in having new eyes. Marcel Proust. So thank you, Janelle.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
That's great.
I hope you are learning things in this program. I know I am. Every week I'm learning something that I can take with us. Join us next week. Kathy's going to be talking about a very, very important subject, and she's going to focus on caregivers. The stress on caregivers is great. We're going to talk about the stress on the caregivers, what concerns them. So please join us. Now go and make it a great day.